You decide what works best for you. And then on top of it, investing. You only keep the money for your basic needs and keep an emergency fund. And whatever you have left, start investing.
Welcome to Truly Passive Income. I'm Neil Henderson.
And I'm Clint Harris. And today's guest is Alina Trigub. She's the founder of Samo Financial. She's a former tax accountant who transitioned into real estate and financial education. She recently gave a TEDx talk on how financial literacy begins at home and published a book aimed at helping everyday investors build lasting wealth. Her personal journey from Soviet immigrant to financial mentor brings a grounded perspective to investing in education. And I'm really excited about this one today. Alina, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I am excited to be here. Thank you, Clint and Neil, for inviting me. And thank you so much for pronouncing my name correctly. That doesn't happen very often. So I appreciate that, Clint.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That doesn't happen often for me. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk to you today because Neil and I are both fathers. I've got two young boys, 5 and just turned 2. Neil has a 10-year-old. And one of the things that I didn't grow up in a household that had a lot of financial literacy, lower middle income family with 6 kids. And I feel like I've tried to become a sponge and learn a lot, but one of the things I love about this podcast is that I continue to learn so much from people such as yourself. And I really want to have that conversation about legacy and about the conversations we should be having at home to try to set my children up to have a good impact where they're not spending their lives trading time for money, and allow them to have the freedom to make good choices for themselves and hopefully have a positive impact on the community and people around them. So you wrote a book on this, Your Legacy on Main Street. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background and your journey leading up to writing that book. And then I'd like to go into more conversation about that and some of the important lessons that I need to learn as a father and as a husband.
Thank you for that, Clint. I think you're probably already doing that without even realizing it. We all learn best from our own experiences, right? So that very same thing happened to me. I came to this country when I was ready to go to college. So I didn't have firsthand experience going to public schools here. And when my kids were of age and started going to school, not so much in elementary school, but more in the middle school, I noticed that the school system was not teaching the kids how to be prepared for the real life. And my assumption was confirmed when my daughter, who is older, entered into high school and started taking classes. The classes they were taking were appropriate for the age, like financial literacy, financial education. But one particular answer that I received from her sparked my desire to take things into my own hands. So basically, she came home and I asked her what you were covering today in the finance class. And the answer was we were learning how to use ATM machine. After going through high school education in a former Soviet Union, where I think integrals are taught in elementary school, if I remember correctly, that definitely threw me off, and I decided to take the matter into my own hands. Not that I put a blackboard and sat down my kids and started teaching them integrals. No, that would never work. But I tried different things. And over the years, after trying many things, I realized that the best way to teach your kids is just by, number one, sharing your own experiences, and number two, doing it in a non-traditional manner in a relaxed environment. How do you get the kids into a relaxed environment? You make them do something that they enjoy. We found a common ground by playing board games. My family is big on playing board games. One of our favorite games, which Neil, I'm sure you heard in my TEDx talk, is Rummy Cube. We love playing Rummy Cube. But it doesn't have to be Rummy Cube. It could be Game of Life. It could be cash flow one-on-one. The point is, find something that you enjoy doing together. And while you're doing that, whether it's playing a game or maybe going outside and playing ping pong or playing soccer and whatnot, start a conversation. It's just when you're sitting down and playing a board game, it's a lot easier to start a conversation because Number one, your attention is partial on the game. Number two, everyone hopefully is putting the devices aside and concentrating on in what's in front of you. And that gave us a ground to start talking about different topics, finances, politics, life. Mine and my husband immigration journey. My husband's also immigrant, just like myself, and sharing that with our kids and indirectly teaching them, because what could be best than helping kids to cut down on the mistakes that my husband and I already made, so that they can start making their own mistakes and hopefully learn some through our mistakes by not repeating them. So that's what we started doing.
So much of elementary school education, all the way through high school, and even into college, is essentially set up it was built in around the turn of the century. And it's designed to basically turn people into clerks. They wanted people who could add, subtract, multiply, divide, and read and write. That was it. Just enough to be a clerk for international companies that were, buying and selling and shipping and receiving. That was it. And that is most of our education still revolves around that to this day. And there's so little. I think in elementary school, I may have been taught how to balance a checkbook, but nothing deeper than that. Nothing about investing. I didn't learn about investing until my dad sat me down, I think when I was maybe 28, and said, "Hey, here's a mutual fund. You should put your money in a mutual fund, put away a certain percentage, and you're basically buying into the total US stock market, yada, yada, yada." But that was it. I didn't learn any of that in college. I didn't know how to manage my money. I didn't know how to start a business. None of that. You're an immigrant. You started as a CPA. Tell us a little bit about what that financial journey looked like for you that sort of opened your eyes.
Excellent question, Neil. Just one small correction. I was never a CPA. I was a tax accountant with the NY Big Four.
Thank you for the correction.
And I did sit for the CPA exam a couple of times, but when I failed by 1 and 2 points 2 times, that confirmed my assumption that taxes or accounting was not the field that I wanted to spend my entire life in. But anyway, you brought up an excellent point. Going for an accounting degree and then working as a tax accountant in both first public and then private world gave me, number one, foundation for what I'm doing now. And number two, it taught me an important component, which a lot of people don't realize. When I started investing in real estate, first passively and then actively as an operator, one of my first questions has always been and still is, when I'm looking at an income, how is it going to be taxed? And many people, and I say it after numerous conversations, because I also served in a role of investor relations, just like you guys, for a private equity firm. So I know from firsthand experience that many people look at investment and the first thing they see is IRR or cash on cash, without paying attention to that income. Is this going to be ordinary income? In other words, is this income going to be taxed at the rate that I'm in, my tax bracket rate? And for many for many W-2 professionals that are in a higher bracket, that can add an additional income that they will be taxed on. So they need to understand the difference between something that taxed as an ordinary income versus something that taxed as a capital gain that has a cap of 20%. And that's a big difference. And when something is taxed at 20% and you're in a 33% tax bracket, that adds additional 13% of the income to your pocket. So always ask that question: how is that income taxed? How is it going to impact me? Is the operator planning to hold the property for a long time, or is it going to be a quick exit and maybe even taxed as a short-term capital gain, which is a lot worse because it's taxed as an ordinary income? So those are the questions that passive investors need to think about and need to ask the operators when they're considering a specific investment.
I love that, because everybody looks at the exit as that's it. It's over. And the reality is the exit is not the exit. the next tax bill is the exit. I don't think anybody's brought that point up before. I love that. That's next level. And I love the way that you think. You have to think multiple steps down the road. And one of the ways that you've talked about thinking multiple steps down the road is in your book, Your Legacy on Main Street. Through that book, you walk readers through the steps of building generational wealth. This is probably a really loaded question that potentially has an hours long answer, but can you just summarize what that typical path looks like?
Sure. And Clint, as you said, it is a very loaded question, but on a high level, it's the basic fundamentals that we all know, just we haven't thought about it in a way where you can do it in a conscientious manner, step by step. And for me, all those steps are based on my personal journey and the journey of my clients that I've helped, which again, on a very high level, you need to think of a debt. Is this a good debt or a bad debt? If it's a good debt, you keep it and you keep paying it. If it's a bad debt, which is car loans, student loans, high interest rate, then pay it off as soon as possible and only concentrate on a good debt. The debt that gives you leverage, the debt that gives you tax advantages. Keep that and keep paying that. And on a high level, what is better, paying a mortgage that is 5% or putting money into CD that's going to pay you 3.5%? You decide what works best for you. And then on top of it, investing, you only keep the money for your basic needs and keep an emergency fund, and whatever you have left, start investing. Most people start with Wall Street, which is totally fine. If that's the easiest thing for you to do, start with Wall Street. Put some money in the Wall Street, but don't stop at that. Continue diversifying. Put some money into Main Street as well. What do I mean by Main Street? Main Street is essentially everything outside the Wall Street. That includes real estate, that includes gold, oil, businesses, anything that you can buy and or invest outside the Wall Street includes Main Street. For me personally, a significant part of Main Street investing has been in real estate, but for other people, it could be something else. The point here is that when the next stock market fluctuation comes around, and I personally lived through at least 4 or 5 significant stock market fluctuations, we know that the next one is coming. I mean, look what we had a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure it wasn't the last one. We're going to see the turbulence again this year and probably in the next 2 years as well. So instead of have sleepless nights, consider diversifying, consider having some money in Wall Street, but also diversifying into Main Street and investing in real estate, and where you can diversify further. You can invest not just in multifamily, as half of the world is talking about, but you can also invest in storage. Look at the asset class that you guys are in, which is self-storage that is climate control, which I think is essential nowadays, especially as we're going through the climate changes and getting more and more of the warmer weather. I think this is the asset class that has a significant future and definitely is the essential for many years ahead. So definitely consider multiple asset classes and consider diversifying your portfolio so that you can have a better nights and sleep well and not worry about your portfolio.
I love that. So one of the stories that you tell is about a casual conversation that you had at one of your kids' sports practices that led to someone investing a year later. So that's an example of you taking someone that really hasn't done that investing outside of Wall Street, most likely, and you have a conversation that sparks a thought that eventually grows into taking action. So how do you think, tell me about that situation and about planting that seed and how that creates awareness in terms of financial literacy and awareness in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I love that, Clint. So, and just like anything else, when you take your kids for sports practices or to school as a part of parent association, you always talk about things outside of school. You talk about work with other parents, and what else do you talk about? Stock market turbulences. So this was during another stock market turbulence that happened at the time. That concerned parent and I were talking about how the stock market is down, and they were concerned that all of their money were in the stock market. And they asked me, what am I doing about this? And I shared with them what I was doing, how I was diversifying into real estate, passively investing in the syndications at the time, and helping my portfolio to have a balance that I didn't know existed many years ago because real estate investing, specifically passive real estate investing, is not highly publicized. That triggered their interest. They started researching it, and it took them a little over a year, but they finally came back to me. It was husband and wife. They came in both, and they said, "We are at the point where we're ready to take it to the next step. Please tell us what we need to do to take the next step and start investing." And that's when the real conversation began. And they've been investing since then for the last 6-7 years, and very happy with their strategy and their approach. And Clint, to your point, that's how legacy building begins, because it's one thing to start investing, but it's another thing to teach future generations how not just to take advantage and use that money, but how to continue building the generational wealth, how to manage money. Because as you guys know, and I know real well, one thing that school don't do, they don't prepare kids for the real world. They don't teach them how to manage their finances, how to manage their budget. Kids may go to school and get some sort of mechanical or medical degree, and be good doctors, be good mechanical engineers, but they cannot manage a simple budget, which is insane. And that stuff begins at home. You don't have to have a degree in finance or in accounting to teach them that, but you do need to share your personal life lessons, personal and professional. So again, the kids can learn from your mistakes and can start looking for sources of information on their own. Nowadays, it's easy. They can go on YouTube, they can Google, they can ask ChatGPT, and they can learn on their own how to manage budget, what to do next, how to start investing, what's compounding, what is dollar cost averaging, what is syndication, and so forth. I know I'm throwing a lot of terms, but the sooner the kids and even adults hear those terms and start learning about them, the sooner they realize that those are the things that they need to take advantage on. And it doesn't matter whether you're 25 or you're 45, you still can take advantage of that and start learning and start investing and diversifying your portfolio. Because guess what? If you start making the mistakes now, then the next generation can learn from you and hopefully make less mistakes and hopefully retain more of the wealth that you built for them and continue building that wealth and continue teaching their kids and grandkids.
I love that. Alina, you've raised capital during both boom times and lean years. What have you learned about investor behavior in tough markets, and how have you adjusted your approach based on that?
Great question, Neil. So I was lucky enough because I left the private equity firm at the perfect point when the storm was going on and when the storm was increasing essentially, and when it became increasingly harder to raise capital. I did, however, have a switch earlier where I started raising capital for syndications and single asset syndications, and then switched to raise capital for a fund. And what I learned from that, which is definitely applicable to any environment, is you can raise capital in any environment. The idea is to know what you're raising for and to understand who is ideal avatar for your investment. Investors that are investing in single asset syndication versus investors that are investing in a fund are very different. But you need to understand who is the fund or single asset syndication ideal for, what are the pain points of those investors, and essentially give them the solution to solve their pain points. The same applies to the environment we're in now. There are still people that sitting on the sidelines and not investing. If you have the solution to solve their pain points, give that solution to them. The challenge is to find that perfect match. See who are you solving the problem for and find those candidates and become the matchmaker. bring the people the solution that they're looking for, and they'll come to you. You will not need to be searching for them. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah, totally. I now that I'm thinking about it, I think that you're the third person with an immigrant background that we've had on the podcast, and the similarities that I'm seeing is that you're all super high achievers, and you all have in common that you've recognized opportunity and that you've been lifelong learners. I think that a lot of people born with the privilege that we sometimes have in this country, you just get used to that always being there and being an option, and you get lazy and complacent. And instead of grabbing the opportunity to educate yourself, I grew up, I got my first cell phone when I was a senior in high school, the Nokia brick phone. Well, we just had the last generation that is not going to know what it was like to graduate college without AI, right? In terms of smartphones in your pocket, all of a sudden, I remember it being shocking to me when anybody could pull out their phone and Google anything, and you just had that access to anything, and the opportunity was there, or YouTube, and now you've got Chat GPT. I think things are picking up and creating more and more opportunity, and I think one thing that potentially could be lost there is creating a generation of lifelong learners. That's the real thing that I want to impart to my kids is be a lifelong learner and educate yourself. And if you start that early, I think that there's probably a better chance that they're constantly looking for opportunities and better ways to do things. And one of the things that you mentioned is the barrier to entry for a lot of people is educating, that they don't know what they're missing. And a lot of them, it's because they're not out there looking for it. So the goal that I have is I want to teach my kids the things that they need to know. But what I really want to teach them is to be on the lookout for the things that they don't know, and to be hungry and to be a lifelong learner in terms of like within your marriage, within your relationships, within your financial literacy, everything, be willing to educate and learn. And that's a commonality that I see of like people recognizing the opportunity that we have in the world right now and in the country. We have a better chance of networking and learning than we ever have. I'm blessed to spend time with you today. I never would have been able to do that even 5 or 10 years ago. Didn't even know it was an option. So I think our ability to have success in life right now is greater than it ever has been. And if I don't do it for my family, I feel like that's a me problem. That's on me. But we also have greater numbers of distractions than we ever have. And there's more noise in the world than there ever has been. And so teaching ourselves to turn off the noise and constantly be a lifelong student is something that I really strive for with my kids. And it's something that I see in you that is something that I hope that they can emulate. And with that, I want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about the culmination of your professional career and everything that you've been doing, both as an LP, as a GP, as a capital raiser. And I want to ask about Samo Financial, your company that you're the founder of. So please tell me a little bit about that. I'm guessing that financial education is probably a lot of the journey of getting people to the point of being ready to invest outside of Wall Street and into Main Street. So tell us a little bit about Samo Financial, what your goals are and what you've done.
Absolutely, Clint. Before I go there, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the topic that you talked about, which is the immigrant's journey. I was blessed with an advantage. When my mom and I immigrated here, I had nothing, we had nothing. So I had nothing to lose. And that kind of pushes you over the border to do things because you want to be able to literally put food on the table. That was the idea initially when we worked multiple jobs. My mom also decided to get an education here after 2 degrees in Soviet Union. So we both were going to school full time and had a bunch of multiple odd jobs just to put food on the table. People that are born here don't have that advantage and more blessed, and that makes it harder for them to overcome that barrier. However, the best way to overcome it is to work on yourself to switch from having a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And the best person to help the kid would be their parent, because we're all preconditioned with that fixed mindset. Go to school, get a degree, go to work, where it should be how can I make money? How can I earn enough in my 20s and 30s so that I can enjoy my 30s and 40s and so forth? I mean, life is short and we have to enjoy it. So it's getting to that switch point where you switch from having a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And we as parents can help our kids open up that door to opportunities to uh, switch to have a growth mindset. The sky could be the limit. So that's about that. Going back to your question in terms of SEMA, SEMA was born specifically with the goal to help other people around me build generational wealth. I started SEMA when I was working my W-2 career in IT, information technology. And what I saw at work was the same type of conversations and the same type of thoughts that I was having myself. I'm working, I'm going to get to retirement, and then what? Or the stock market is going through the crashes. How I'm going to survive on this? What do I do? And I saw that kept repeating myself over and over with my W-2 colleagues. And I thought, what could be a better way than starting a company where I can produce digital content? And at that time, it was more of blogs than anything else. So that I can share my articles, my knowledge with other people. And then it evolved into webinars, into videos, into speaking at the corporate retreats and so forth. But I decided to take it to the next level and just help people to get out of that rat race, not necessarily sooner overnight. It's a slow process, but help them prepare for that process. For instance, in my case, I did not leave my job. I got a pink slip during COVID, but guess what? At that point, my husband and I were prepared for that. Why? Because I started building a well-diversified portfolio years ahead. No, I'm not Nostradamus. I didn't know this was going to happen, but I wanted for us to have a backup plan. I wanted for us to be prepared, and I started investing. And that's exactly what I'm doing in my one-on-one coaching sessions with my clients. I'm guiding them how they can learn that process of investing and how they can start investing on their own. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give anyone advice. I don't tell them what to invest in. Instead, I share with them the knowledge that I combined through my 2 business degrees, my 25 plus years of corporate career, and through my 9 years of investing journey, where I started investing outside of Wall Street into Main Street, and now helping others to do the same and take the same approach and build that wealth, that portfolio ahead of time so that they're prepared for when their pink slip comes over, or if they want to take advantage of it and leave their jobs on their own without waiting for the pink slip to come their way.
You know, your journey, I used to talk about this a lot. I had a previous podcast and I was like a broken record with this, is that people think you've got a W-2 income, you're working a great job, it's a nice, stable job that's never going to go away. You know, you're a federal employee who is going to have a great job forever, and you're going to have a federal retirement. And then next thing you know, the administration changes and decides that, yeah, we're going to get rid of all of you, or you get laid off during COVID, or there's a big economic shock. And I think you bring up such a great point, which is you were able to survive that because you had already, just by luck, built a diversified income. And, you know, so much we talk so often, we consider this financial literacy is, well, we invest in Wall Street. We invest in Wall Street, we're investing in the total US stock market and maybe beyond and international. And that basically makes us diversified. Well, the reality is you're not that diversified. You're still just in paper equity. And so it is so incumbent on people to learn from people like you, that, you know, you need to start looking for ways to build other sources of income. Whether that be in investing in businesses or real estate or syndications. You need to find ways to build an income that you could live off immediately. and not have to, dig into that Wall Street nest egg. And
I've got one thing I'll add on there is, and use a word there that I would reclassify. I don't think it was luck that right. It was foresight. It wasn't that, you got laid off and you were lucky because you had this other income stream. That's what we're all building for, right? Luck is just when timing meets preparation. The reality is, I think what we're all getting at here, and I'll say this first, is that I don't believe that money creates happiness. I don't believe that wealth makes people happy, and I don't think that you can buy enough things to fill that void in your heart. I think happiness comes from people and relationships and giving back. But what wealth does create is options. It creates options and opportunity. And when something bad in life happens, and it will happen to all of us, we all know that the story ends with loss and despair at some point in life. But the difference is when you've prepared for that, you have options as to how you handle that and how you can bless the other people in your life as well. So we talk about money all the time. To me, it's just a representation of the opportunity that it can provide you and give you options of doing something a better way than being pigeonholed into doing things one way because the person that controls your paycheck tells you that that's the way that it needs to be done. So I think that you found yourself in a tough situation, but because you had the foresight to prepare for that without even knowing that that was what was coming down the pipeline, it created opportunity for you to make a decision that was based upon what's best for your family as opposed to what's best for my paycheck.
100%. Definitely agree with you.
I love that. Well, I'm going to ask, we got one question that we try to ask every guest, and it could be yours. I'm interested to hear what the answer is, but what's one book, could be a book that you like or don't like, but what's one book that you find yourself recommending over and over to friends and colleagues? I'll be the first to throw out that your book is called Your Legacy on Main Street. It is also available on audiobook. I'll be downloading that as soon as we're done here, and I'm excited about that. Outside of your book, is there any other book that you find yourself recommending over and over?
Quinn, thank you for that question. And I usually start with recommending one of my favorites, which is an ancient book. It's over 100 years old. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. While many real estate investors claim the Purple Book to be their Bible, which it is, it's definitely a good foundation, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I definitely enjoyed it, and even have a funny story how I forced my kids to read the teenage version of it. But I think The Richest Man in Babylon, what amazes me in that book is that it talks about the concept that was true 100 years ago and still true today. And it's so fundamental and so essential to understand that it can take you to the next level. Pay yourself first. Think about how you can build your nest egg first before paying the expenses and before doing things. And many people just don't see that. And I highly, highly recommend, if you haven't read it, to read that book and to start learning from that book for sure.
Okay, Richest Man in Babylon is a great book as well. But you brought it up, so I'm going to ask it. How did you convince your teenage kids to read the Purple Book, also known as
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, the Purple Bible?
Yes.
Great question. I found out that there is a teenage version, and my kids were young at the time. Both were teenagers, but they didn't want to read it. So I tried what typically the parents do. I tried to bribe them. Ice cream, money, movie, all the other stuff. No, they didn't want any of it. But then eventually they budged and they both agreed to read. They read and we made nothing of it. And then one day I was riding in a car with my son. I think he was 11 or 12 at the time, so pre-teenage age. And I was having a conversation with the investor on a speakerphone, and he knew not to speak during that time. But it turns out that he patiently listened to the conversation. And after we hung up, he turned to me and he said, "Mom, you were talking about assets with this guy." And I'm like, how did you know? And he said, "Well, you made us read that Purple Book, remember?" So I was happy to hear that some of the ideas did stay with him and he remembered the fundamentals from the book.
I love that. That's it. This has been really encouraging to me. We just got to the board game stage, and I love Romacube. I'm our family Romacube champion, so I love to hear that. I'll take any of you on. I'll bring it. You better bring your A game. And we just bought Cash Flow. My 5-year-old is probably not quite there yet, but we're working on it, and so that's been very encouraging for me to hear.
Amazing.
That. I'm glad
Music
we're heading
to my
down
ears.
that.
Thank you, Clint.
Yeah, I love that. Well, listen, Alina, founder of Sama Financial, thank you so much for joining us today. If any of our guests want to connect with you, talk more about your coaching sessions, or learn more about what you guys are doing at Sama Financial, what would be the best way for them to do that?
The best way would be to reach out to me at alina@samafinancial.com. They can also type alinatrigub.com. Same thing will come up, or they can find me on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, guys. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for listening and watching the Truly Passive Income podcast. If you liked the show, if you think it would be useful for someone else, the greatest compliment that you could give us would be to share the episode, leave a comment down below, or leave us an honest review. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know down below. And remember, with truly passive income comes freedom of time, place, and the freedom to pursue your higher purpose.